Darren Rovell from Collect here with Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect. We're running out of words, I guess, in this hobby. Leighton, thanks so much for joining us. We are talking about collectors purchasing Beckett, the parent company of PSA, purchasing Beckett on Monday, undisclosed price. Lot of talk in the hobby, obviously, because as you know well, collectors purchased SGC, which during COVID was kind of the vintage grader, right? They had emerged in that way, and now Beckett, and now owning, according to GemRate, 79% of the grading market. So when you first heard this news, what was your reaction?
WTF?
And why?
Because I knew that as a collector, you were really going to have a lot more of a limited choice. And I also felt, if we're being transparent, that for the collector, it's not so great because I believe that turnaround times will continue to get worse with those three respective companies, and pricing will also only increase, i.e., get worse for the collector. And so that is why I thought that.
Now, inside, they are have told people, I've heard, that this is to get more graders and to get more efficient and lower the prices. Obviously, that's against, legally monopolistic practices. If you aim to lower the prices and you are keeping Beckett as is and are not absorbing it, then, I guess the scrutiny is going to be less. So they say that they're helping this will help them get more graders. However, Beckett is going to continue to be separate. So you kind of wonder, okay, so if you're getting those graders from Beckett and then they're going to PSA, who's going to want to get stuff graded at Beckett anymore?
Well, for whatever it's worth, I think that we've seen the blueprint for how collectors, I mean Collectors Universe, might handle this because we could just look at the way they've handled SGC. So right now, SGC does exist. They've become more of a boutique grader per, what Collectors Universe has said. And I can tell you firsthand because I utilize SGC and I still like that gang, the group over there. Submissions have taken longer to log into the system and turnaround time has slowed. So if a boutique firm means for Beckett that ultimately they're going to have your submissions take longer to be logged in and longer to be turned around, I don't see how that's beneficial to the collector. But I also understand, for whatever it's worth, because those that are maybe, let's say, addressing Nat by name, Nat doesn't own 100% of collectors. I don't think he gets to decide, wholly 100%, this is the path they're going to take. And so maybe he has one set of, hey, this is, in my mind, what I'd like to do. But maybe that didn't happen with SGC. He's not necessarily shared all of that.
Other than timing, how else should collectors, and I'm talking about the collectors together, not the company, how should collectors look at this? So if it's not timing, if it's not price, what about the actual grading itself? What were the differences between, obviously, you always talk about Beckett, oh yeah, PSA will do a half or one down. What was the differences with SGC? And did anything happen that you noticed that, say, a card that would get an SGC 8 could have gotten a SGC 7.5 or 7? In other words, is there some sort of PSA control that you can see from a grading standpoint?
No, I've not experienced that. I've really only experienced, I would say, more so a slowdown in both the logging of submissions and the turnaround. But I do understand why collectors, meaning ourselves, Darren, we're collectors, right? And all of us out there are concerned because we now have more limited choices. I did want to throw out, and it's not in any particular order, but I had one, I wouldn't say it's a wild idea, but I know there's been a lot of talk. For example, is a Jordan 1986 Clear PSA 10 really worth the premium over a 9? I'm not arguing one way or the other, but if there are, let's say, a contingency of folks out there,
Let me just put this in perspective. So a
please.
9 right now is 18,000 and a 10 is 180,000, roughly 10x.
So the last 10 just sold for 279 on eBay Live, and I would say nines are
No.
about 25,000.
Right. Okay. 10x. Yep.
Yeah, give or take. But yeah,
Okay.
so it's a really good point. So if collectors are worried about PSA acquiring Beckett, is there room for a grading service? And I can't believe I'm asking this, but is there room for a grading service that simply just authenticates your card and doesn't actually grade it?
Hmm. That's interesting. I think there probably would be room for that, right? There's a lot of people at that level.
I think that, and I'm not starting a business in that arena, but I do believe if prices continue to increase and turnaround times continue to get worse for the collector, the average collector, why do you want to necessarily pay on every single card you submit for grading? Maybe you just got your uncle's collection. In this case, the gentleman you met with earlier today, who's in his 80s, maybe they don't need to get a grade. Maybe in some cases, just saying it's authentic is the peace of mind that we all need.
How much time are you going to give PSA collectors? Um, how much time are you going to give them to see if this runs the same pattern as SGC?
It's a really good question. So, for transparency's sake, I don't grade a lot with Beckett, meaning myself personally, my company Just Collect. We just don't utilize Beckett very much, but I will tell you, I've bought a number of Beckett graded vintage collections through the years. And the reason that is, Darren, is because, like you and I, we read Beckett growing up. Well, there's a lot of others out there that did, and they didn't necessarily feel comfortable with PSA, the newcomer at the time. So they might have got vintage cards graded with Beckett 15 years ago. So there are instances in where we've bought a number of Beckett graded vintage cards. And to be fair, they've been fine. I mean, we've cracked them out, we've resubmitted to PSA or SGC, but we've not really submitted to Beckett in that capacity, like raw to get graded.
Does this hurt someone who has graded with Beckett? Do they have to now go to PSA?
Well, at least not today or tomorrow, because theoretically, what PSA is saying is similar to SGC. Even if it becomes a boutique style brand, Beckett will still exist. But I mean, listen, let's be straight here. Let's say you're Shine and you're sitting on millions, if not tens of millions, of Beckett graded modern cards because that's your forte. That's the arena that you play in. I'm curious what someone like that is thinking today.
Do you think anyone is going to go nuts and start grading with tag or CGC, in a revolt? Is there any way this can backfire? Or does PSA and collectors have such power and they know it that nothing matters?
I don't know if I want to use the word it backfire, but I would say that this is the way people make choices, not just in our country, around the world. Use your wallet. So theoretically, Darren, if the entire collecting community decided this was not okay, and we all decided, and of course this is impossible because this would not happen, but we decided to use CGC and tag starting tomorrow, and PSA literally had no submissions coming in, they would need to sound the alarm because they're so backlogged. But make no mistake, it would have impacted their near and short term business, and they would have no choice but to make a change. What's the chance of that happening? Zero. And the reason being is because the realized prices of PSA graded and authenticated cards and autographs tend to bring the most on average.
What do you think the chances are that PSA collectors lowers prices because they found more graders?
It's a really good question.
Give me a number. What percentage you saw? You're saying SGC, it didn't happen. Beckett maybe has more graders. They are internally are telling the story that that's the goal. Obviously, some of it matters with how much submissions they're getting, right? But like, do you think in the next year we will see some prices coming down?
I'm going to try to look at things optimistically, and the glass is half full for the collector. I think maybe there's a 40% chance that that could happen and a 60% chance against, meaning just throwing this out there in a scenario where Beckett's actually had capacity on the sidelines, meaning with the graders, but they're not executing that capacity. Maybe there's a scenario where that extra capacity can be utilized for SGC or PSA, and somehow the extra capacity is brought to the collector in a way that turnaround times are better and or prices decrease. Do I think that's likely to happen? No, I don't.
Leighton Sheldon of Just Collect, thanks for joining us on Collect TV.
Thanks for having me.